Hello, my name is Lydia McDemus, and I am a nutrition major at Oregon State University. I would like to talk to you about whether or not the United States should require labeling of genetically engineered product-containing foods. The current labeling policy regarding GE foods was implemented by the United States Food and Drug Administration. GE foods are only required to be labeled if they have significant changes in composition or nutritional value, or if potential allergens are present. A label would also be required if toxicants were present in levels higher than the acceptable limits. In 2001, the FDA proposed guidelines for voluntary labeling of GE foods, but there has been much conflict over whether or not labeling should be required to state if a food is genetically engineered. There are both positive and negative aspects to labeling GE foods as such. Some of the pros include allowing consumers to know if they are purchasing GE or non-GE foods, the ability for consumers to avoid foods that may cause them problems or are in conflict with their religious or ethical views, and the examples set by 21 other countries that require mandatory labeling. On the other hand, some cons include an increased cost to all consumers, an implication of danger in GE foods, an infrastructure that is incapable of dealing with the complexities of mandatory labeling, and an unnecessary concern about animal products contaminating plant products. Consumer rights are a complex aspect of the arguments for and against mandatory labeling. On one hand, if consumers want information about what they are buying, they should be able to have it. Consumers should definitely be aware of any environmental or health risks associated with the foods they are eating. Because of this, most Americans support mandatory labeling. On the other hand, labeling GE foods as such may actually cause confusion for many consumers. Having something labeled as GMO-free implies that GMO-containing foods are substantially different or possibly dangerous. There are many questions that need to be answered before any kind of mandatory labeling policy could be implemented. One is, which specific technologies would require labeling? Just genetic engineering or selective breeding and other conventional breeding types as well? A second question would be, what percentage of a GE ingredient must be present in order for a label to be required? A third question involves animal products. Should animal products be required to be labeled if the livestock were fed GE crops? Although these animals may have no trace of the genetically engineered gene in their DNA, should they still be considered GE? Once these questions are answered, there has to be some way to verify that producers' claims are actually accurate. This can be done through content-based verification, which involves testing food for foreign DNA, or process-based verification, which requires extensive tracking and data entry. Both of these processes involve a significant investment of time and money. Mandatory labeling would likely have a significant impact on the economy of the food industry, which would in turn affect other industries as well. At the most basic level, there would be an increased food cost due to the equipment and supplies required for making labels. Also, the testing and verification process would increase cost. A more subjective aspect of the economic impact of labeling involves consumer perception. Because non-genetically engineered foods may be viewed as unsafe due to the implications inherent in a label, consumer avoidance may be high, causing a decreased consumption of GE foods. When the FDA discussed voluntary labeling in 2001, some of their recommendations included specific words that could be used on labels. GMOs, genetically modified, and free should be avoided, as should labels that imply the quality of other foods. Genetically engineered ingredients or ingredients produced using biotechnology are a few recommended label statements. In conclusion, the complexities and the economic impacts of mandatory labeling need to be adequately weighed against consumer concern and right to know before a definitive conclusion can be made.